On December 7, 1941, the world witnessed a cataclysmic event that would forever alter the course of history. In June 1940, U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt moved the American Pacific Fleet from San Diego, California on the west coast of the United States to Pearl Harbor in the territory of Hawaii as a response to Japan's aggression toward China, followed by the embargo of vital raw materials to the newly industrialized Japan. Meant to coerce Japan to back off from her aggressive policies toward her neighbors, these moves instead tempted Japan to escalate the situation. The advancing of the Pacific Fleet was viewed as the most current of a long series of insults on Japanese pride, while the embargo only tempted the Japanese to secure South Pacific islands rich with oil, rubber, tin, and tungsten for themselves. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, whose personal opinion was against a war with the United States, was tasked with constructing the very war plan. He was confident that he could engineer a devastating attack on the U.S. Navy, but he also believed that unless Japan had a way to march her army straight to Washington, it was not wise to engage in war with U.S. for an extended period of time due to the vast U.S. industrial potential. In October 1941, the Japanese Naval General Staff gave final approval to Yamamoto's general plan of attack. In November 1941, Yamamoto added Pearl Harbor to the list of targets. Yamamoto's strike plan for Pearl Harbor, with contribution from Commander Minoru Genda, involved 6 fleet carriers, thus making it the largest carrier strike in history. The plan called for multiple waves of attack, systematically targeting and destroying specific ships, airfields, aircraft, and dry docks. In order to effectively use torpedoes in the shallow harbor, the torpedoes were fitted with fins so that they would run closer to the water's surface without diving into the mud. Yamamoto assigned the task of attacking Pearl Harbor to Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo. A total of 24 vessels supported the 6 aircraft carriers in its journey from Hitokapu Bay in the Kuril Islands in northern Japan toward Hawaii via a northern route on November 26, 1941. In the basement of the Pacific Fleet headquarters building in Hawaii, Joseph Rochefort and his intelligence team had been tasked with keeping an eye on the disposition of Japanese warships for months, with much of the information sourced from intercepted radio messages. Events such as the Japanese changing warship call signs twice in a short period of time, the increased level of radio message encryption, and the sudden disappearance of at least 4 fleet carriers from U.S. knowledge, his team had mistakenly placed 1 or 2 Japanese carriers in the Marshall Islands, made him suspicious of Japanese intentions. While he faithfully reported his findings, which all pointed to war, to Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet Admiral Husband Kimmel on a daily basis, he also noted his sentiment, one that was shared by most others at Pearl Harbor and Washington, that Pearl Harbor was safe from Japanese attacks for the time being. Vice Admiral William Pye, the commanding officer of the battle fleet, was among those who expected war to break out in Asia rather than in Hawaii, thus there was no need to send his battleships out to sea to avoid being caught in an air attack. When the Japanese fleet departed from the Kuril Islands, Nagumo had ordered any non-Japanese vessel that came in contact with the strike fleet to be quickly destroyed before they could send out any warning. On December 5, 1941, the Japanese fleet came across Russian transport Uritsky, carrying US-built M2 medium tanks and other war materials, sailing toward Vladivostok, Russia. All guns of the Japanese fleet were trained on the transport, but Nagumo, reneging on his previous order, chose to let Uritsky go, for he knew the top officials at Tokyo wished to maintain the non-aggression pact between the Soviet Union and Japan. It was never proven, but some sources indicated that the Uritsky did indeed radio Soviet authorities of the finding, and the Soviets notified the Japanese fleet that if Uritsky was to be spared, the Soviet Union would not report the incident to anyone, namely, the United States. Had this exchange really taken place, it appeared that both sides held their ends of the bargain. Uritsky arrived at Vladivostok safely, while the Japanese fleet sailed otherwise undetected across the northern Pacific. Some speculated that the Soviet silence might be due to Moscow's wish for the United States to enter the war, thus putting direct pressure on Germany while keeping the Japanese occupied. On December 7, 1941, the first contact of the battle was made by United States Coast Guard ship Condor at 0350 hours less than 2 miles southwest of the Pearl Harbor entrance buoys. After receiving visual warning from Condor at 0357 hours, destroyer USS Ward began patrolling the harbor entrance. At 0637 hours, Ward sighted the periscope of a Japanese submarine. Ward attacked the area with depth charges as destroyer USS Monaghan set sail to join her in the submarine hunt. At 0740 hours, a telephone call was made to Kimmel's office, reporting the submarine contact, but nothing material came out of that report. A few minutes before 0800 hours, the Japanese aircraft arrived over Hawaii. When the large cloud appeared on the radar screen, the U.S. Navy radar crew dutifully called in this finding, but the radar men were told by U.S. Army officers that they were probably seeing a group of B-17 bombers scheduled to arrive later on this day. At 0755 hours, the now well-known message "Enemy air raid, not drill" was sent from the Navy Yard signal tower as the incoming aircraft began dropping their bomb load. The first targets were airfields. Dive bombers dropped bombs, mainly incendiary, and strafed Hickam Field and the Naval Air Station on Ford Island. Many American aircraft were caught on the ground. At 0758 hours, "Air raid, Pearl Harbor. This is not drill," was broadcast to all ships in the area. At about the same time, another group of aircraft attacked the battleships moored on the south side of Ford Island in the center of Pearl Harbor. The torpedoes and bombs hit with precision, detonating USS Arizona's forward ammunition magazine, engulfing the ship in a fierce ball of fire. Anti-aircraft gunfire commenced very quickly after Japanese aircraft were sighted, while larger caliber weapons took anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes before they began firing. Between 0825 hours and 0840 hours, Japanese aircraft continued to dominate the skies over Pearl Harbor, although bombing activities largely ceased. At 0840 hours, 30 Japanese high-level bombers appeared, mostly still targeting battleships, along with 18 dive bombers. Damage from this second wave of attack was reported as serious. With careful planning on part of Yamamoto and his staff, and perfect execution of Nagumo and his air command, the surprised Americans suffered greatly as few larger warships escaped unharmed. Battleship USS West Virginia sank very quickly, and battleship USS Oklahoma capsized before sinking. The bomb hit suffered by USS Arizona at 0810 hours would take the lives of 1,000 sailors. Battleships USS California, USS Maryland, USS Tennessee, and USS Nevada all suffered various degrees of damage during the raid. At 0830 hours, Nevada attempted to get underway, but realized if she was sunk at the harbor opening she would block the harbor entrance, thus she was ultimately beached at nearby Hospital Point. By 0940 hours, most Japanese aircraft had left the vicinity, but American anti-aircraft fire continued to fire at any sign of hostile movement. Tense atmosphere led to a few friendly fire incidents where U.S. fighters that finally got a chance to take off were shot down. By 1000 hours, the skies over Pearl Harbor were clear. Final tally revealed that 5 of 8 battleships at Pearl Harbor were sinking, sunk, disabled, or heavily damaged. A total of 21 U.S. ships were sunk. 188 aircraft were destroyed, and 159 were damaged. Over 2,400 American were killed. This figure includes civilian deaths of 68 caused by friendly fire, killed by U.S. anti-aircraft shells that landed in the city of Honolulu. The Japanese suffered only 29 aircraft shot down and 5 midget submarines sunk. While the attack was devastating, the U.S. Navy would later realize that it could have been worse. While Vice Admiral Pai's decision to keep the battleships in port meant they were sitting ducks for the Japanese air attack, had he sailed the warships out of the harbor, there would have been a possibility that they would be attacked at sea, and the ships would be forever lost instead of merely sinking in shallow waters and allowed the possibility of refloating. U.S. fleet carriers, all of which would play critical roles in later chapters of the war, were far from Pearl Harbor, thus removed from harm. Immediately after the attack, the Americans made an attempt to launch a counterattack against the Japanese fleet. Mistaking that the Japanese had attacked from the south, USS Enterprise was ordered to sail in that direction to intercept. Naturally, the U.S. carrier found nothing and returned empty-handed. Many historians speculated, however, that had she been sent in the right direction, she would be no match for the powerful Japanese fleet and would probably be sunk. Staying on the theme of counterfactual history, there were criticisms against Nagumo for not launching a third strike on Pearl Harbor to destroy port facilities and fuel stores, for doing so would eliminate Pearl Harbor as a viable naval base, thus forcing the U.S. Navy to fall back to bases on the west coast of the United States. Had Nagumo actually launched a third wave of attack, Japanese doctrine dictated that the warships that had survived the first 2 waves of attacks to be targeted, thus making this criticism invalid. On the diplomatic side, Japan was supposed to declare war on the United States precisely 30 minutes before the attack started. However, due to decryption difficulties, the Japanese embassy was not able to deliver the message until the attack had already started. Making the most out of the situation, President Roosevelt announced to the American public that the attack was a sneak attack, thus able to rally the previously isolationist country to fully participate in war in order to seek revenge. Admiral Kimmel and his U.S. Army counterpart Lieutenant General Walter Short were made the scapegoats, shouldering the blame for the devastation. 9 investigations were conducted, finding Kimmel and Short guilty of dereliction of duty. Their names would not be cleared by the United States Senate until 1999, after both of them had passed away, but the Department of Defense continued to place blame on Kimmel and Short. Ni Hao Incident. 7 December 13, 1941. During the Pearl Harbor attack planning, Japanese naval leadership designated the Hawaiian island of Niihau as the designated location to land damaged aircraft that could not fly back to their carriers. A submarine was to be dispatched to pick up any downed pilots on that island. It was thought that the island was uninhabited when in fact it had a small population of 136. On December 7, 1941, Japanese Navy pilot Airman First Class Shigenori Nishikachi from carrier Hiryu, who had taken part in the second wave of the Pearl Harbor attack, crash-landed his damaged A-6M20 fighter on Niihau. When he came down, he was merely 20 feet from resident Hola Kaleohano, who was completely unaware of neither international politics between Japan and United States nor the Pearl Harbor attack that had just taken place. He took Nishikachi's pistol and documents, and then helped him out of the damaged aircraft. Nishikachi was treated with a party in the late afternoon, as he was a rare guest on this remote island. Meanwhile, the islanders sent for first-generation Japanese-American Ishimatsu Shintani to act as translator. Shintani was aware of the attack, and only exchanged a few words with Nishikachi before leaving. The islands then sent for Yoshio Harada and his wife Irene, both second-generation Japanese-Americans. The Haradas were not aware of the attack beforehand, and Nishikachi shared the news. The Haradas decided not to translate that portion to the islanders to prevent panic or anger. Nishikachi asked Kaleohano to return the documents that Kaleohano had taken from him previously, but Kaleohano refused. Later in the evening of 7th of December, the islanders learned of the attack via radio, and only at this time Harada shared what Nishikachi had told him earlier regarding the attack. The islanders decided that on the next day, when the island's owner Aylmer Robinson would have arrived for his weekly visit, Robinson would escort Nishikachi to the proper authorities. On the next day, Robinson failed to arrive to the surprise of the islanders, nor did he visit in the following few days. Unbeknownst to them, a ban on boat traffic had been implemented due to the state of war. Nishikachi had stayed with the Haradas during those days, with guards outside the residence. At 1,600 hours on 12th of December, Shintani approached Kaleohano on behalf of Nishikachi with $200 in cash, asking to purchase Nishikachi's documents. Kaleohano rejected the offer. Yoshio Harada and Nishikachi, without waiting for Shintani's return, attacked the lone guard outside of the house as Irene Harada played music with a loud volume to cover up any noise of struggle. They retrieved a shotgun and Nishikachi's pistol from a warehouse, and then locked the guard in the same warehouse building. Harada and Nishikachi went to Kaleohano's house to demand the papers. They could not find Kaleohano, who had saw them coming, with weapons, and decided to hide in the outhouse. After a few minutes, Harada and Nishikachi gave up looking for Kaleohano, and headed for the downed plane. It was when Kaleohano decided it was his chance to flee. As he made a dash, he was discovered by Harada and Nishikachi, who yelled "Stop! Stop!" and fired a warning shot, and Kaleohano kept running, and got away. Kaleohano reached the village and warned of the situation, joined shortly by the guard who had escaped the warehouse. The islands evacuated the village. Kaleohano, who still had possession of the documents at the time, gave the documents to a relative for safekeeping before setting out on a 10-hour paddling trip by boat to the nearby island of Kauai to see Robinson. Meanwhile, Nishikachi reached his aircraft, made contact with the Japanese Navy, and then proceeded to set the aircraft on fire to avoid its capture by American authorities. At 0300 hours on 13th of December, Harada and Nishikachi burned down Kaleohano's house, hoping that the documents that Nishikachi desperately tried to recover were hidden somewhere inside. At Kauai, Robinson was already hinted of trouble on Niihau when other islanders tried to signal him with lanterns and reflectors, but he was denied visit the island due to the ban on boat travel. After daybreak on December 13, 1941, Harada and Nishikachi kidnapped islander Benny Kanahele and his wife Ella. They kept Ella Kanahele as hostage, and ordered Benny Kanahele to bring back Kaleohano. Kanahele, who knew Kaleohano had already left the island, pretended to make a search. When he returned in failure, Harada said that Nishikachi would kill Ella, along with others from the village, if Kaleohano was not found. During that conversation, Kanahele attacked Harada and Nishikachi. Kanahele grabbed the shotgun, and Nishikachi attempted to retrieve his pistol from his boot, but Ella grabbed his arm and slowed him down. Pushing Ella aside, Benny Kanahele shot Nishikachi 3 times with the shotgun, then picked him up and threw him against a wall. To ensure his death, Ella Kanahele bashed Nishikachi with a rock, followed by Benny Kanahele's slashing of Nishikachi's throat. Witnessing the attack, Harada grabbed the shotgun that Kanahele had just set aside, shooting and killing himself. On 13th of December, Kaleohano's party reached Kauai, and brought back Robinson and military authorities. Irene Harada and Shintani were taken into custody. Irene Harada was imprisoned for 31 months, having released in June 1944. Shintani was sent to an internment camp in the continental United States, but returned to Niihau after the war. U.S. President Harry Truman released the reports of the U.S. Army and Navy boards of inquiry into the Pearl Harbor disaster. The Army board placed blame primarily on the failure of Lieutenant General Walter Short for failing to alert his command. The U.S. War Department also came in for criticism, for failing to keep the President's office informed of developments in negotiations between Japan and the United States, as does Secretary of State Cordell Hull, for delivering America's counterproposals on November 26, 1941, thereby preventing time for war preparations. The Navy Board's report blamed Admiral Husband Kimmel for not rotating the in-port periods of U.S. warships in a less routine manner. Pearl Harbor is a testament to the strength of a nation. We must never forget the events of that fateful day, as we strive to create a better and more peaceful world. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our channel for more captivating historical content.